Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're taking a plunge into the world of persuasion, exploring the fascinating tactics used to get us to say yes.
Oh, the psychology of persuasion, it's everywhere.
It really is. We're going to uncover the subtle and not so subtle ways compliance professionals use these techniques in everyday life. And we'll be looking at Robert Cialdini's influence. The Psychology of Persuasion, really a foundational text in the field.
It's a classic for a reason.
Absolutely. Let's start with one of Cialdini's key concepts. Click, whir responses. These are those automatic reactions we have to certain cues, like he gives this great example of mother turkeys.
Ah, yes, the cheep cheep sound.
Exactly. It's such a powerful trigger for those turkeys that even a stuffed polecat, if it makes the right sound, will trigger that maternal instinct.
That's the power of those fixed action patterns. A single trigger, and boom, predictable behavior. Cialdini argues that humans, well, we have these pre-programmed tapes too.
So we're not that different from those turkeys after all.
Not really, but how this plays out in our lives is fascinating.
Exactly. So how do compliance professionals, those masters of persuasion, exploit these click-whir responses in us humans?
Well, take the Xerox machine study by Langer. Just by using the word because, people were able to cut in line, even if the reason they gave was nonsensical.
No way. Just the word because. That's crazy.
It is. It shows the power of that trigger word to elicit an automatic compliance response.
Wow. So is this click-whir thing something we see in other areas of life too?
Absolutely. Take the expensive equals good heuristic. Think of tourists buying overpriced jewelry just because it has a hefty price tag.
So our brains are wired to think expensive equals quality, even if there's no real proof.
Exactly.
That makes me a little nervous about my own shopping habits, to be honest.
The key is awareness. Once you understand these automatic responses, you can start recognizing them and making more conscious choices.
All right, so mental shortcuts, got it. Definitely going to be more mindful of those from now on. But click-whir is just one piece of the persuasion puzzle, right? What other tactics are out there?
Let's talk about the rule of reciprocation, one of the most powerful weapons of influence.
Reciprocation. So like, you do something for me, I do something for you.
Exactly. But compliance professionals leverage this by giving something, even if it's small and unwanted, to make you feel obligated to give back later.
You mean, even if I didn't ask for it, I'll still feel like I owe them something?
Yes. And it's surprisingly effective. Remember those address labels charities send with their donation requests?
Oh yeah, those, I always thought they were a bit much.
But those unsolicited gifts, they almost double the response rate.
Wow, so even those tiny gifts trigger a feeling of obligation.
It's powerful stuff. Cialdini shares this amazing story from World War I about a German soldier who spares an enemy soldier's life, all because the enemy shared some bread with him earlier.
No way. That's an incredible example of how powerful even a small act of generosity can be. Okay, I'm definitely going to be more careful about those gifts now. They might not be so innocent after all.
Yeah.
Like, let's say the initial request is something big, something I would say no to. How do these masters of persuasion handle that?
Ah, that's where the rejection then retreat technique comes into play.
Rejection, then retreat. That sounds sneaky.
It is. You start with a large request, knowing it's likely to be rejected, and then retreat to a smaller request, your real target all along.
So it's like setting the bar high so the actual request seems reasonable.
Precisely. Think about it like a good cop, bad cop routine.
I see. Like that time a Boy Scout tried to sell me a $5 ticket. And then when I said no, offer a $1 candy bar instead.
You got it. That smaller request suddenly seems way more appealing.
I totally fell for that. Had no idea it was a calculated tactic.
It's more common than you think. Cialdini even suggests it might have played a role in the Watergate scandal.
Watergate? Really? You're saying this sales tactic had a part in that?
The initial plan was so outrageous, it was guaranteed to be rejected. Then a smaller, less costly plan was presented, which, while still problematic, seemed more reasonable in comparison.
Wow, that's a mind-blowing connection. Scary to think how that tactic can be used on such a large scale.
It highlights how powerful it can be. And what's interesting is that it doesn't just increase compliance, but also fosters a sense of responsibility in the person who agrees.
So because I feel like I helped shape the agreement, I'm more likely to honor it.
Exactly. That sense of ownership, even if manipulated, can significantly impact our commitment.
Okay, this is eye-opening stuff. It's like I'm getting a crash course in manipulation. We've covered click-whir, reciprocation and rejection, then retreat. What other persuasive tricks are out there?
Well, next up, we have commitment and consistency.
Okay, commitment and consistency. Those are like pretty basic human traits. But how do they play into persuasion?
Well, the idea is that once we make a commitment, we have a strong desire to stay consistent with that stance, even if the original reasons for it are no longer valid.
Ah, so like, we feel this need to appear consistent, even if it means sticking to a decision that might not be the best anymore.
Exactly. And compliance professionals are really good at using this need for consistency against us. They get us to make small, seemingly insignificant commitments and then leverage those to secure larger requests down the line.
So a slippery slope of commitment. Can you give me an example of this playing out in the real world?
Toy companies are masters at this. They'll undersupply those super popular toys before Christmas.
Ah, creating that frenzy.
Exactly. Parents end up promising their kids something they can't actually get. Then, after Christmas, they ramp up the advertising. Parents are reminded of those promises and feel compelled to go back and buy, even though Christmas is over.
Wow, that's pretty sneaky. Toy companies really playing the long game. Are there any historical examples of this principle being used?
Cialdini talks about the Chinese POW camps during the Korean War. The Chinese were incredibly effective at getting American prisoners to collaborate. And it wasn't through force or anything. They started with small, seemingly harmless requests.
Like what?
Things like copying pro-communist statements or writing down minor complaints about America.
I see, so easing them into it.
Exactly. And these small acts, easily rationalized, gradually escalated into bigger acts of collaboration.
Wow, that's a chilling example of how powerful these seemingly harmless commitments can be. It really shows how consistency can be used for good or for, well, not so good. Okay, so being mindful of those initial commitments, no matter how small, is crucial. What's next on our persuasion journey?
Well, let's move on to the principle of liking. We're all more likely to say yes to someone we like, right?
Yeah, liking, that seems pretty straightforward, but I'm sure there's more to it than meets the eye.
You bet. Compliance professionals know how to get us to like them and then use that to their advantage.
Like how so?
Well, think about a salesperson who showers you with compliments. Feels nice to be flattered, right? But those compliments can make us more vulnerable to their sales pitches. Cialdini actually shares a story about how he got tricked into subscribing to a magazine.
Really? How'd they get him?
The salesperson just complimented his taste.
Oh man, I've totally been there. A well-placed compliment can definitely throw me off guard. Are there other factors that influence liking?
Oh, definitely. Physical attractiveness plays a role. We tend to see attractive people as more persuasive. Similarity is a big one, too. We're more likely to like people who are similar to us.
Like the saying, birds of a feather flock together.
Exactly. So compliance professionals might try to create a sense of similarity with you, maybe mirroring your body language, agreeing with your opinions, or even claiming to have similar interests. They might also try to leverage cooperation, knowing that working together toward a goal can build camaraderie.
I guess those team-building exercises at work might not be so innocent after all. Clever, but kind of manipulative. So how do we protect ourselves from being swayed by liking? It seems like such a natural response.
Yeah, trying to suppress those feelings probably won't work. A better approach is to just recognize when you're feeling more liking than you should, given the situation. Then, try to separate the person from the request. Focus on the merits of what they're offering, not on your liking for them.
That's a good point. It's like taking a step back and asking, am I genuinely interested in this, or am I just being charmed? All right, I'm ready for the next principle.
Okay, this one's all about authority. We tend to obey people we see as authority figures.
Authority, yeah, that's a big one. We're taught from a young age to respect authority. Parents, teachers, police officers.
And for good reason. Respect for authority helps keep things running smoothly. But this tendency to defer to authority can be exploited.
How so?
Think about commercials with doctors endorsing products. Even if they're not real doctors, that perceived authority can influence our choices.
Oh, like that classic 9 out of 10 dentists recommend line.
Exactly. We just assume they must be right because they're the experts.
Are there any studies that show just how powerful authority can be?
Cialdini talks about the Milgram experiments, where participants were told to administer electric shocks to another person. The shocking thing is that most of them continued to do it, even when the other person was clearly in pain, all because the experimenter, an authority figure, told them to.
That's terrifying, just blindly following orders, even when it seems wrong. But, I mean, do we always have to question authority?
It's not about blind disobedience. It's about being aware that symbols of authority can be manipulated. Titles, uniforms, even accessories can create that illusion of authority. So before you just follow orders, ask yourself, is this person truly an expert? Do they actually have my best interests in mind?
Those are great questions. It's so easy to just go along with what someone in charge says, but as we've seen, that can be dangerous. All right, I'm feeling a lot more empowered to question authority now. What's next?
Okay, let's talk about scarcity. This one plays on our fear of missing out. We tend to value things more when they're less available.
Scarcity. It seems like all these principles really tap into our deepest psychological vulnerabilities.
That's right. Think about limited time offers or one-day only sales. They create a sense of urgency, making us feel like we have to act now or miss out.
I fall for those all the time. It's like my brain goes, if I don't buy it now, it'll be gone.
Cialdini talks about his own experience with this. He really wanted to tour the Mesa Temple when it was briefly open to non-Mormons. The limited availability made it seem much more appealing.
Yeah, I get that. It's like those Black Friday sales with people camping out for days for a deal on a TV, limited quantity, limited time. It just amps up the desire. Like our brains are saying, scarce equals valuable.
Exactly.
So be wary of those limited time offers. Don't let scarcity cloud your judgment. It's interesting how all these principles connect, like pieces of a bigger puzzle.
That's right. They don't operate in isolation. They often work together.
Okay, that makes sense. So far, we've covered 6 principles of persuasion: automatic responses, reciprocation, rejection, then retreat, commitment and consistency, liking, and authority. What's the last one we need to understand to complete our deep dive?
The final principle is psychological reactance.
Psychological reactance. Okay, that one sounds a little intimidating. What's that all about?
It's basically this powerful urge to resist when we feel like our freedoms are being threatened. Like we have this strong need to maintain our freedom of choice.
So it's like that rebellious teenager who does the opposite of what their parents tell them just to prove a point.
Exactly. You see it in young kids too, like around age 2, when they start testing boundaries and asserting their independence. And this instinct to protect our freedom, well, compliance professionals, they know how to use it to their advantage.
Oh, I bet. So how does this psychological reactance play out in the realm of persuasion?
Think about those limited time offers or those one-day only sales. They create the sense of urgency, right? You feel like you have to act now before the opportunity is gone.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
if I don't buy it now, I'll miss out. It's definitely happened to me.
And that feeling, that pressure, it's partly driven by psychological reactance. They're restricting your options, which actually makes you want those limited options even more.
It's like reverse psychology for shoppers. So it's not just about the product itself, it's the way it's presented. The limited availability, the urgency, it all feeds into that reactance response.
Exactly. And this principle applies to information as well. We tend to find information more persuasive if we think it's exclusive or not widely known.
That makes sense. Like, if I'm one of the few people who know this, it must be valuable.
Yeah.
It plays on our desire to be in the know.
You got it. That sense of exclusivity can make a message a lot more persuasive.
Wow. It's amazing how easily we can be influenced. But hey, at least now I know about these tactics. Knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. Understanding the psychology of persuasion can help you make more informed decisions and avoid falling prey to these tactics.
All right, so let's recap those 7 principles of persuasion one last time. Automatic responses, reciprocation, rejection, then retreat, commitment and consistency, liking, authority, and of course, psychological reactance. That was a fascinating deep dive, and I feel like I've learned so much.
It's really valuable information to have. Remember, though, these principles can be used ethically, too. They can promote positive behavior and influence people for the better. It's all about using this knowledge responsibly.
That's a great point. It's not all about manipulation and deception. These principles can be used for good, but it's so important to be aware of how they can be misused, especially when we're making important choices. Think critically, question assumptions, and consider different perspectives. And with that, we wrap up our deep dive into the psychology of persuasion. I hope you enjoyed exploring these fascinating concepts with us. Until next time, stay curious and stay aware.